Hey everyone, thanks again for hitting that play button. This is another episode of the Dave Bullis podcast. Before we get to today's episode, I just want to say a few things. It's December 31st. If you're one of the subscribers, you're listening to this early. It's December 31st, 2016. I want to talk about your goals for 2017. 2016 for me, personally, was a very shitty year. But it also was a very good year at the same time. I know that sounds weird, but I quit my soul-crushing day job in April, got to go to the McKee seminar, got to work on my writing, realized I was running out of savings, trying to find another day job, which I had to take. And again, it's doing IT again. So as you can probably imagine, I'm going to end up hating my life again very quickly, just because that's the nature of IT, it seems. Don't hire enough people. Overload them with enough work that it makes them want to, dive out the window, and then you wonder why you can't keep anybody. But, oh well. But I want to hear about your goals for 2017. My goals for 2017, I have a lot, and I'm going to try to hit the ground running as much as possible. One thing I want to do is I want to start making more stuff for YouTube, and some of that is going to be little short films I'm going to make. I'm going to try to start doing some stop-motion animation stuff. I'm also going to make some more explaining videos, maybe do a few book review stuff, stuff like that, and maybe even get into talking about screenwriting a little more in the details, maybe making like for instance Suicide Squad. I don't know what you guys thought about Suicide Squad. I saw it, I thought it was a train wreck, but I would actually like to make a video about how I would make it better if I got a chance to make it, what I would do. And maybe that'll get a little traction, maybe it wouldn't, or maybe nobody will care, but that's still something I want to do. And amongst, still writing, and I'm still working on all the other stuff I've been talking about little by little. And speaking of which, I have a private filmmakers group on YouTube. If you'd like to join, just shoot me a message, whether it be an email, on Twitter, or even on Facebook, and I'll add you to the group. Slowly but surely, I've been rolling this out, and now we have, I think, 50-some members, and I didn't even expect that because all of a sudden everyone started saying, hey, if you have a group, I'll join it. Why the hell not? No talk about politics. There's no harassing other members, no posting about crowdfunding campaigns. You see, that's a big problem with a lot of these groups on Facebook. People join these groups and then they don't say anything. And, or they just, they'll say anything only when they want to talk about their crowdfunding campaign. It doesn't work like that. You really got to be involved in the discussion, and which is why when people ask me about crowdfunding advice, I say, get involved in discussions, build relationships with people. So that's why when you do have something to actually promote, people actually are a lot more willing to click on that or talk about your project, rather than, because Facebook groups now, a lot of them are just nobody talking to one another. It's just literally, it's people just posting stuff and nobody interacts with it. There's no likes, no shares, no comments. Nobody's going to click on it. And it's just a ton of these sites that I belong to, or these groups that I belong to. And I'm just slowly, one by one, exiting the group, and nobody even cares. I mean, they have like 20,000 people. I just don't get it. So this group was going to be different. So everyone obviously has to ask permission to join. So again, if you would like to join, shoot me a message and I will add you. And we have a lot of different things going on in that group, but we want to actually make sure that people are actually doing stuff. It's not just another, hey, I want to belong type group. So again, that's what I'm doing this year. So again, if you want to follow me along, YouTube, I'm becoming big in YouTube now, and I want to start rolling that out more because Twitter is slowly but surely losing all validity with me. And speaking of shitty day jobs, as I was talking about just a couple minutes ago, my next guest made the biopic shooting Clerks. It's a film all about making Kevin Smith's Clerks, which was about, these two guys working at the Quick Stop in New Jersey and how bad their daily lives were. It was an absolute hit at Sundance. It launched Kevin Smith's career, and it's a movie that I hold in high regard. It's a personal movie for me, and I've always admired Kevin Smith's work. And that's why I couldn't wait to have this guy on, because he's doing his thing. And we're going to talk all about how he got Kevin to make how he got Kevin's blessing to make it, how he got Kevin to star in it, how he got started in filmmaking. We talk about gingers also, oddly enough, and we talk about how he handled production problems and so much more. This is episode 142 with guest Christoper Downie.
You're listening to the Dave Bullis podcast.
Hey, Chris, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Chris, just to get started, I wanted to ask, about you and how you found yourself in the film industry. So were you always, making films, or did you watch a lot of films as a kid growing up?
Yeah. In fact, my family, certain family members, namely my aunt, would not mock me, but criticize me for having too many films. I grew up in the era of VHS, and that's pretty much all we had. We bypassed Laserdisc and went straight to DVD. And I was criticized for having too many. I had like 25 VHS tapes, and my cousin had like 9, and there was a big difference apparently. So that was excessive for my aunt, but not for me. But if she saw she's been in my house since, but if she saw my Blu-ray and Laserdisc, and I've got like UMDs and things like that. If she saw the amount of dead technology and current technology that I have regarding film, and she'd blow her head would just blow. So yeah, very much started off watching films, mainly on VHS and taped off of TV because my mum was a single parent, and we didn't really go to the theatre that often and get to go to the film theatre. So when we did go, it was a big event, and even if the film was garbage, like say the Mario Brothers movie, it was heightened by the fact that we were going to a theatre to see a film instead of watching it on this tiny 19-inch portable. And then obviously as I got older and technology started to catch up with the budget of like a single household, that we were able to get like video cameras and things like that. Or more importantly, my friend got a video camera, and then we started making films with that. The film camera he had was a Tomy £100 film camera, that's not relating to the weight of it. It was the cheapest, nastiest thing ever, and you recorded on a videotape on a VCR. So you had this long AC cable, AV cable that you connected to the back of the player. So you could only really go as far as the cable would take you. So I started making films on that cruddy thing, and then eventually moved to a video camera and film school. And it's just something I have to do. I tried to put it down. I tried to put it down once back in 2010, 2011, when my girlfriend at the time suggested I go back to school and have a backup. So I did graphic design, but I found a way of sort of hornswoggling film back in there. And instead of submitting mixed media, which was the brief, I would be like, oh, here's a film. And they would always let it slide. But yeah, it's a huge and important part of my life. Ironically enough, I haven't watched many films or TV shows lately, and I have like quite a lot, either on Netflix or on Blu-ray, and they just sit there because I'm just not had any time. So some people are talking about the new season of The Walking Dead or Westworld, and I don't have a clue what they're talking about.
Well, I'm in the same boat with you, Chris, because I honestly don't watch. Walking Dead, I'm hit or miss with, and Westworld I haven't even started yet. But speaking of zombies, your first project, was How to Survive a Zombie Attack. That was a short film you did. So, at what point, were you in college when you made that short film?
Let me think. Yeah, I must have been. I went to film school 2004 to 2006. But it wasn't a dedicated film school or a dedicated film department per se, because we don't really have that in Scotland. We had a course that was called television operations. I think there was maybe documentary and television operations. There was no film in there, but you got to make films. You got to make like a 2-minute film, and then a 10-minute film, and then it was a 5-minute documentary, then a 10-minute documentary. So it was all film orientated. You got to make live shows and things like that. So you did like a panel show, or you did a sort of talent show, because we had a film studio. It was rinky-dink as hell. It was, but there was a gantry and everything. You could look down, and everything was programmable and things like that. But at the time, that was midway through film school, and I was set to make another film. I think the year prior, It was blisteringly hot down at this abandoned site where there used to be a paper factory, where, funnily enough, my dad nearly cut his hand off when he was 16. I later found out that was the site of my dad's wound on his hand. We went down there, and my friend brought his guitar because my parents' house was nearby. And he was just sort of playing the guitar, and he had his hat over his eyes, and he was lying with his back. In this like disused area where this used to be a factory, and I was like, this is an amazing area. And I thought, well, why not we do like a sort of Desperado type film? That eventually became a Western because Desperado's been done, and then it became a Scottish Western, then a post-apocalyptic Western, and then we went to shoot it and certain people didn't turn up, so we had to can it, and what we got instead was How to Survive a Zombie Attack. And the reason we did that is because we had the actors. We had to do something, so we basically made that film up as we did it. That was one of the last times I ever did that. I did a follow-up called How to Survive a Vampire Attack, which was improvised, but there was a story. And it made it more natural because my friends aren't actors, although Mark was in it, and he plays Kevin in shooting Clerks and all the peripheral films. But he, again, never considered himself an actor, so if we let them just sort of improvise it, it gave it a sort of nice feel. Plus, since the first one was fully improvised, why not? And then we got to use the disused, abandoned, it wasn't even one warehouse, I think it was about 4 warehouses. There was a gas station there, and it was walled off, and all you had to do was just go up a hill and then sort of jump over the tiny wall. And production value.
So, you mentioned people not showing up. That's a problem that I had as well. When I was making my student films, and that's the killer. Because when you plan something out for a while, and you have everyone even if whether you're using a script or not, you have a plan in place to what you're going to do. And when you have people no show, it's just absolutely, it takes all the wind out of your sails, so to speak. And it was good that you were able at least to improvise and shoot, shoot a short film, which ended up being How to Survive a Zombie Attack. So, at which point, I'm sure, Chris, when it was happening, you probably said, all right, well, let's see what we can do instead, right?
Yeah, exactly. And what we got was better than the film that we eventually shot, because we did shoot that film. I think it was maybe about 3 or 4 months later, we got a new cast, and we did actually end up shooting it. But the film that we shot instead, How to Survive a Zombie Attack, I like a lot better because it's short. It's really it's kind of offensive. And when you get to the end, there's an offensive joke at the end, and I like offensive jokes because they make people laugh in that way where they're laughing and they're also feeling really bad and guilty about laughing. So that's my best type of reaction. Whereas the film that we did eventually was just, it's just this really cruddy cowboy film where most of the people in it have Scottish accents and ain't nobody believing it.
You know what I did, Chris, when that happened, when I had nobody, when I had some people no show, I ended up just shooting a couple of things that I could, calling it a day way too early, and then if it happened again, I would try to figure out a way to combine this footage, and it was like 2 things that were like completely different, they had nothing in common. I was like, how can I make these 2 things something out of nothing? And I tried to make like almost like a movie where there was 3 intersecting storylines, and I was like, what the hell am I doing? But you got to think on your feet as an independent filmmaker.
Yeah, you need to make use of what you have. One of the things that I'm going to do eventually is I've got all this stock footage that I've collected, and it's fantastic stock footage that was filmed all over the world. And I'm reading a book right now. It's called The Rain Dance Producers Lab: Low to No Budget Filmmaking, and it's a good book. It's sometimes technical, and then it's sometimes it's more creative. But there's a moment in it where the author discusses other ways people have made films, and he talks about the short biopic about, what was her name, from the Carpenters. God, I can't remember his name. Is it Simon Hines? The guy that did Velvet Goldmine. His first film was a short in which he did a biopic about the lead singer from the Carpenters, but he did it with Barbie dolls, and he screened it. I believe it was Sundance. God, do you think I'd remember these things?
It happens to us all, Chris. It happens to us all.
Yeah. So he screened it at a festival, and people loved it, but he couldn't release it because he had all the Carpenters music in it. And ever since, I think he's lost the print, and he's lost all the raw footage. So it only exists as this sort of almost experimental YouTube video. It's the only way you can see it. So he found a way to make his first film without actors. He just brought in voice actors later, and it's a strange watch. But you can make movies. There was the main story that I was going to tell you is there was someone who used to go dumpster diving around the back of like Paramount and things like that, and they jump into the dumpster and they just find any offcuts, and they would take all the offcuts of film home, and they would splice it together and try and make a film out of it. And then you can do that. You just need time. You just need like a conceit for every sort of jump to something completely different and stark. So I feel that in challenging yourself, you can get something really creative, and I think that sounds like an interesting idea. Have you still got all this footage, or have you done anything with it?
I have everything still.
Yeah,
just all socked away.
I've got an entire animated, like, it was claymation. It's terrible, but we did it in college because I went and did 6 months animation as well after doing the film course, and it was poorly animated. So I always thought, well, I'll take the footage back into Premiere and I'll take out all the dead frames and all the long takes, because sometimes they took 4 photographs instead of 2 and blah, blah, blah. So I was going to go in and sort of polish that. So that's waiting to be done. I've got half of a third How to Survive movie. And I don't even know if we can ever finish that, but it's just sat there. And I'm thinking, well, maybe one day. I've got an animated film I've recorded all the audio for. A 30-minute animated film that's just sitting there, and I don't want to do anything with it because I don't feel it's as good as stuff that I've done recently. So I feel it would sort of let the side down. The acting in it's really good, but I think the writing's kind of bad. But I might do something with that and put it online because people are more forgiving online.
Yeah, that's also because I posted a couple other short films that I did on my YouTube channel, and I don't know about the other things that I talked about, the things that aren't done. I probably wouldn't post them up just because, I think personally they're awful. And because again, when people don't show up, I had to take this guy, I had to call other people in and be like, okay, instead of playing this role, you're playing this role. And instead of doing this, we're going to do this. I mean, it just completely changed everything. And literally I'm writing I'm changing the script on the fly, and I don't think it meshed too well. But, we were just talking about, lost films and stuff like that. You know what I just found out, which is amazing to me? The Beatles, they actually had a TV movie called Magical Mystery Tour. And I didn't know until recently that because it wasn't too well received, nobody kept a negative of that actual print.
Mm.
I mean, could you imagine that? Just somebody
That's
saying,
crazy.
Yeah, somebody saying
for a band as high profile as the Beatles, especially when you consider how big A Hard Day's Night is. And I think it's still to this day, I've not seen it yet, but it's considered like almost like I wouldn't say a modern classic because it came in the 60s, for goodness sake, but people consider it like a cult classic. So it's weird that no one would hang on to that. But that being said, people lost episodes of Doctor Who, for goodness sake. Mm-hmm. I think there's I've heard at least 1 or 2 really well received scripts for Star Trek and Batman were never filmed. And there's probably episodes and bits and pieces from the actual show that were lost. It's crazy. Like if they'd hung on to that, they could have done exactly what we're talking about. You could string it together somehow. You could do a Star Wars Special Edition 97 edition where you go in with some CG and sort of fix the missing characters or what have you, or just like establishing shots. It's insane.
Yeah, it absolutely is insane when somebody would throw away a print like that. Because even like old movies or even old TV shows, here in America, people would say like, who would ever, back then they thought, who would ever want to watch these again? Because they didn't even, this is before TV. This is again, all of it was theater. And back when, before TV was in every household, the theater, the way it worked in America was you'd go to the theater, you'd get a newsreel, a cartoon, a B picture, then an A picture. And you could sit in there for as long as you wanted to, watching this again and again and again.
Yeah.
And then, they would say, well, how are we going to remarket this B picture? Everyone's already seen it. So now, But yeah, it's just shocking now when you and I sit here and talk about throwing away prints or negatives, and now you and I don't even have really negatives. We just have master files now.
Exactly.
So
I'd like to still be able to call it negative because it just sounds much better. I've got the uncompressed negative.
If people still say hang up the phone here in America, and there's a group of kids who are like, why would I hang up a phone? You end the call. What are you talking about?
Exactly. It's one of those words that's just disappeared. Like the meaning is completely gone, the context, and you have to think about it. Yeah, you used to actually put the receiver onto the actual phone, and the weight of the receiver would keep the phone on the hook, sorry. And then there's off the hook as well. Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys use that in the States, but like the phone's off the hook is something that we used to say. I mean, you can't say it now because if it's off the hook, it means the phone's off. And you'll know because you'll get a message from the person.
Yeah, so I guess, yeah, we still use that, off the hook.
Yeah,
because off the hook also is American slang for something's like crazy. But American
it's
slang
on fleek.
Yeah, there you go. See, in America, it's like there's the two coasts, and then there's like the South, the Midwest, and the Midwest is basically like, where everybody all like filmmakers tend to ignore for one reason or another. But both coasts, though, where all the slang originates from. And so I live in Philadelphia, so that way I'm pretty well versed in all the slang in America now. But
yeah.
but that was meant to be a joke, and it didn't come off as that. But
well, the reason you guys have slang on the coasts is because you originally would have had people from all over coming in, and it's like metropolitan cities with people from all over the world, and words evolve. And that's essentially where we get slang, and the reason they probably don't exist in the center of the United States is just because they don't travel well. But they've got there's strange words that we have up north in Scotland, like I think it's a loony, which is what is Canadian money, but
yeah.
In Scotland a loony is a boy, like the Highlands of Scotland. Like I think my gran took my uncles up there years ago, obviously, and somebody said, "Oh my God, it's a bonny pair of loonies you have there." And my gran said, "Would you just call my sons?" And she's like, "No, loonies means boys. It's just boys. It's one of our words." It is so weird. I mean, that doesn't even like bloke. That makes sense, but loony, that's just insane. No pun intended.
I was going to say a loony, yeah, that's Canadian money, but because as we talk about all these cultural differences and stuff, I was just talking to somebody who's in international distribution, and he was talking about how now, because everything is so interconnected in the world, whether you make a movie in the UK or you make it in America, international sales are so important now, particularly China is so important now for
absolutely, yeah.
So it's something that I wonder as we keep going on, Chris, as we keep moving forward. I really wonder how this is going to affect everything, in terms of decisions like guys like you and I make, and decisions how studios make, and even like keeping the whole thing alive. I mean, I really wonder if you, like, let's just say, well, obviously, if you make a local independent film and you put it on maybe even on your own website, and if somebody from China were to watch it, I really wonder if they would actually be able to even understand even the half of what we're actually saying, because of that slang again. Yeah.
Well, I think that the more exports you get to China, the more they start to pick up on it. In my opinion, cinema, all the films I saw as a kid were American. Cinema is cultural education, because I wouldn't be aware of certain trends and cultural differences between Britain and America if I hadn't watched things like The Sopranos, Ghostbusters, all these things. I'm quite well versed with the East Coast, because all my favorite films are set in the East Coast. All my favorite TV shows, and I'm talking about factual shows as well, and non-scripted stuff like Comic Book Men and Practical Jokers. You get an education watching that if you're British, maybe not so much when you're American, especially not if you live on that coast, but you pick up all these different words, and it's good for someone who occasionally appears in their own films, because the accent, you get bits and pieces of accents and pronunciations that you probably wouldn't have known about. Back in the day when you didn't have that, you'd have to go to a dialect coach. It probably cost you hundreds, maybe even thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah,
and I think that exactly the same thing will apply the more films go to China. And obviously they've got their whole sort of thing on with regards to violence and things like that, hence why they didn't take Deadpool. But if you tailor movies to the Chinese audience, it's not really going to work. If you have a scene in it set in China just for the heck of it, for the Chinese audience, but you can also have it in the international version, that's fine. But I think to just export the film as is, pretty much with Chinese titles and maybe some subtitles and whatnot, then that's the best thing to do, because then everybody starts to understand the culture, and it only take 10, 20 years for them to sort of get used to certain things, and they can understand the references. I mean, I don't know what TV's been like out there, but we've had American TV as long as I've known, and I think, like the 60s and the 70s is probably when we start to get things like that. So I just think keep things as they are, and they should do the same. They don't tailor their films for us, and there's loads of stuff in Chinese films that I really enjoy, and is strictly Chinese, especially when it comes to comedies. I would not want them to change their comedies and make them like British farce comedies or slapstick American comedies. So I think we should all just sort of remain as we are, continue to grow in our own cultures, but, export and import and learn from each other.
Yeah, I always have whenever I talk, to friends of mine about, comedy and culture and art and all this other stuff, I always say, Chris, I'm always afraid of something becoming homogenous, of like sort of everything just sort of becoming the same sort of standard. And that's one of my fears, because I'm always like, I when I watch a British comedy, I know what I'm going to get to some degree. You know what I mean? When I watch an American comedy, the same thing, and Chinese comedy, and even some other things. That's why I'm always afraid of if everything becomes a little too homogenous, if we all start looking and acting and talking the same way.
Yeah, that will eventually happen, but we're talking quite a far bit down the line, and that will be with everything. But that is a long way off, and even still, you will still be separated by land, unless you can teleport through the internet, and that's still going to be a contributing factor. So, like, things are different from village to village, from house to house. You've got your own words, so you're going to pick up things, but you're also going to continue to develop, and it just might be faster. But yeah, I agree. I don't want things to. I don't want to just when you get all the coloured clay we call plasticine. So you've got the blue clay, and you've got the grey clay, and you've got the green.
Chris, you there?
My headphones are faulty, so it just started playing a podcast in my ear.
No problem.
And I thought you'd started playing it, and I was like, is this my walking off music?
Well, Chris, it's been nice. Here you go. Here's your. I'm playing you off, buddy. No,
but my analogy was just, it's when you're a kid, and you stick all the clay together and make it into this disgusting brown color. Nobody wants that. Everybody wants to be different, and everyone wants their own culture, and that should apply with filmmaking. But everyone's different usually, unless you're a director for hire. Then you're meant to be like the chameleon. You're meant to be able to just make the film look a certain way, mimic someone else, so that no one really realizes that it's a different director type of thing. But people will keep what makes them different, and that'll go for taste as well.
You just brought up a good point, and about looking a certain way, and we're talking about your career, and I know I'm kind of jumping ahead here in your career, but you're shooting Clerks, and I was fascinated by that project. I saw it on Indiegogo, And I have so many questions for you about the project, Chris. And I just wanted to, as we start to talk about it, I wanted to ask, what was, what sort of drew you to start this project? Shooting Clerks, which everyone listening, shooting Clerks is the biopic of shooting Clerks, the movie by Kevin Smith, which was shot in 1994, I believe. So, Chris, 93. So, Chris,
Yeah.
so what actually drew you to sort of start developing this project?
Ooh, I don't know how long your episodes normally are, but I'm about to make it like half an hour longer. Right, so back when I started making films as like a 13, 14-year-old, my friend bought an ex-rental copy of Dogma, and we sat down and watched it together, and he was something of a film snob, really was. He considered there was high art and then there was Dogma, basically. Films like Dogma. He was so snobby that he didn't consider Ghostbusters a good film because it wasn't overly cerebral. Right? Now, it's a great film, but he couldn't see that. Now, I know deep down inside he did think it was a good film, but he tried to build himself up as this sort of really, really good art critic, and he would apply that to film as well, and like, get a grip of yourself. But I'm glad he didn't, because he sold that copy to me, and I took it home, and I watched it like 150 times, and really, really dug the fact that there were characters that crossed over and were mentioned. Now, I didn't really know that at that time, but at the end of the film, obviously, it says Jay and Silent Bob will return, I believe, in Clerks 2 at the end of that. And something like playground sort of whispers, the saddest playground whispers. Do you know that Jay and Silent Bob are in another film? They're in a film called Chasing Amy. I was like, oh my god, really? I remember taping it off TV, and I sat down to watch it. I was like, this is a bit heavier than Dogma, which is ironic because Dogma's about the end of the world, but emotionally it's a lot heavier for a 14-year-old, and I was watching it, and I remember enjoying it, but thinking, where the hell are Jay and Silent Bob? And then when they do turn up, you'd forgotten about them. And then that just sort of led me to, I think the last one I watched was Mallrats, but that eventually led me to Jay and Silent Bob, and then obviously Mallrats. And when Jersey Girl came out, I think I was about 18, 19, and I was going to the theater by myself. So I just really liked the interconnected universe, and was drawn to how he put specific actors together on numerous occasions. So I was really into that. His world building was impressive. Plus his films were good. I really enjoyed them. So when I started to make films, I don't think I really put any Kevin Smith references into them, but when my girlfriend suggested that I have a backup, I made a short film that was meant to be my tribute to a podcast called Hollywood Babylon, because everyone was sending in like fan art, and I really liked it, and I just wanted to show my appreciation. So I put a casting call up on starnow.com, and I says, looking for 2 actors to play leads in this film. I need someone to play Kevin, I need someone to play Ralph. And the description was really descriptive, because the people exist, I was able to describe them exactly as they are, and rather humorously, I believe, because somebody emailed them the casting call. I remember walking home from work and listening to the podcast, and it says, someone's making a film about us in Scotland. And I thought to myself, oh, damn it, someone's beat me to the punch. And at that point, I decided not to do it, because it's a stupid idea. Why make a fan film about a podcast? Who's going to want that, and why do you even want to do that? So I shut it down in my head, but I didn't shut down the casting call. And after they spoke about the film, and I made Kevin laugh with the casting call description, I decided, all right, well, I might as well make it, because they might show it. So, a couple of months down the line, I've written the script, and I speak to my friend, who's Kevin in the film, Mark Frost, and I say, Mark, do you want to play Kevin? And he doesn't get excited by anything, really. Nothing excites him. He's very laid back. He's actually more like Brian Johnson in real life. He's kind of got that attitude. He'll not insult you for a reaction, but he's very much got that attitude. And I told him, I'm going to make a film, and do you want to play Kevin Smith? And I saw a reaction in his face, like his eyebrow twitched and he smiled slightly. So we did the film. And then we sent it to Kevin and Ralph, and they showed bits of it over the course of a couple of weeks as well, with photographs and updates and things, which was really touching. And then after that, we did a couple more. We did Get Greedo, which was the first film that we released through Kevin's channel, C-Smod. And that we got a huge reaction for that, because he did an introduction video and he put it up on Twitter and Facebook. And he thought we were Australian for some reason. So at the beginning, he's like, these kids from Australia or New Zealand, and he covers his mouth. And I'm like, why does he think we're from New Zealand or Australia? And then we got to thinking, producer Brett and I, who plays Brian Johnson in Get Greedo and in Shooting Clerks and in Emo Get Right Again, which is coming out ahead of the full run of Shooting Clerks. It's going to be a promo film. We were sat there and discussing what we should do next, and I suggested maybe we go to film number 3 or 4, which at that point we were going to do Shooting Clerks as film number 3 or 4 in the line of features. And he thought, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, maybe we should do that. And that's where it started. And I vowed that I would write the script that summer, between year 1 and year 2 of my degree. It was actually year 3 and year 4. And that's what I did. And that was the last time anything ever went smoothly and straightforward on Shooting Clerks. It was the last time. Things are still not going smoothly. It's just a bumpy road all the way.
So, Chris, I wanted to ask, before I get into production, I wanted to ask, did Kevin ever directly contact you? Did he ever find you directly to say, hey, Chris, what's going on, or offer any direct support like that?
Well, he never said what's going on, but we speak on email. There has to be a reason. He's too busy to care about what I'm doing that specific time. We're not overly close or anything like that, but yeah, he's very, when he gets time, he's very generous. He'll say he said some really nice things that have always made me feel good. Somebody put, it didn't bother me. I just thought it was funny. Somebody said, I don't know, can you do swearing on your podcast?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, right. So somebody put, and I'm paraphrasing, somebody put a comment under one of the trailers or maybe even one of the shorts, and it's like, "You're not Kevin Smith, you fat piece of shit." And I thought, right, well, I'm not fat, but okay. You'll never be Kevin Smith. Stop fucking trying to be Kevin Smith. You're a fat fucking loser. And I thought, oh, okay, well, that's funny. So I took a screen grab and I put it online. And it's one of the only times Kevin comments at the bottom is like, well, he's calling you fat and he says you're a fucking loser, so you're already Kevin Smith. Fuck that guy. So he gives us support like that. I remember saying, like, oh, I was worried about something, and I think I apologized for how like a shot turned out. And he's like, he says, never apologize. You've made a film that's incredible, and I know I'm biased because it's about me, but you should be proud, even right down to every single shot. And it made me sort of feel better regarding this broken shot. And we went and reshot it, restructured it, and added some effects to extend it to make it look like the original shot. And God, it looks perfect now because it's just this like few words of kindness. He's been really supportive, and just one of the nicest guys.
Yeah,
they always say I've said this numerous times, and I'll say it till the day I die, unless he comes up in a dark alley and stabs me in the back with a knife. Never meet your heroes is what they always say, but that doesn't apply if your hero is Kevin Smith.
Yeah, the reason I asked is because if he contacted you, Chris, is because I see he retweeted everything, and obviously he had to at some point, I'm sure when you made Shooting Clerks, even before you got to the whole production side, I'm sure he there's a whole rights thing and there's a whole copyright thing, and that's why I wanted to ask about that. So I'm sure at some point maybe either he emailed you just to say hi and maybe give you some support. Or maybe he just, or otherwise he just called to say, hey, what's up, Chris?
Well, we were in contact with him as soon as I finished in 2013 when I finished Get Greedo, and it was Jason that contacted me first and asked me to contact Jordan Jason's wife, who's the head of Smodco. And then that's our, like, one of our main contracts is Jordan, and she, again, very, very supportive, and she's always helping us out and retweeting and things like that. So we've been, chatting with them off and on for the last 3 years. And when I decided to do Shooting Clerks, I says, I'll email Kevin and Jordan. I said, right, we're gonna do Shooting Clerks. All right. And I don't remember them ever saying no, but I also don't remember them ever saying yes. But they're happy about the film, and it's, Kevin's, said he's very touched, and he never thought he'd make a movie, let alone have a movie be made about him. So he's all for it, and we don't, take any. We don't take any pops at him or anything like that. We show him in a realistic manner. We're not. I don't want it to be somebody commented that it's Sycophants the movie with somebody's subtitle, because we know Kevin and we've spoken with him, so we're going to make a movie in which we kiss Kevin's ass for 90 minutes. But that's not the case. There are moments in the film where people are wrong, people are right, people say the wrong thing. I'm not building him up to be this big golden calf, shall we say. He's a man, he's a person. We present him that way, but ultimately he swings right back round to be, this is Kevin's story, so we have to show him who he is. It'd be a disservice to not show him who he is. Luckily, he's not an asshole, so we don't have to portray him as an asshole. But yeah, everything's good. We don't show anything really that would get us into trouble. We don't use anything we don't have the rights to use. There are certain things like costume pieces that have graphics on them that we get around that by putting a jacket on someone so you can see the middle of it, but you can't see either side of it. So things like that. Or we just take it out and so like if someone's wearing a Yankees cap, we just get the same design of cap, same style of cap, but there's no Yankees logo on it. So people are just going to have to forgive us for that. It's not that accurate because we have to cover our backsides.
Yeah, and I think people will understand. And it's funny too, because a friend of mine, you spoke earlier about not meeting your heroes, and a friend of mine actually met Kevin Smith one time. When he was doing the where he goes around and just talks, an evening with Kevin Smith, and he actually got to go up to talk to Kevin. And he was so nervous because he's like, man, I don't want, Kevin was hilarious during this whole 2 hours. He's like, I don't want to talk to Kevin afterwards and Kevin just be, blowing me off. So he finally said, you know what, I'm going to go meet him. And he told Kevin, he's one of his filmmaking inspirations and everything. And he said, do you have any advice for me? And Kevin just said, yes, don't make Jersey Girl. And that was it.
It's one of his go-to jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's too hard on himself. Jesus, he listens to the critics too much. I can watch. Honestly, there's some films of his that I would watch after Jersey Girl, if you see what I mean. I quite like Jersey Girl. It's a film. It does the job, and I think because it's more formulaic than his other films, he needs to cut himself some slack. People have made way worse movies.
Yeah, that's very true. And, I have, I think almost all Kevin's movies, and I have the Evening with Kevin Smith. And, he's a guy also I've used as inspiration. And, I made a TV pilot, and I even, I used Clerks as an example of what could be done. And, he's actually done a lot, and I think now I think he's a lot happier now. By the way, Chris, just doing what he's doing now with Yoga Hosers and Tusk and all that stuff.
Yeah, he is. Very few people get to the point where they can just do whatever they want. I mean, granted, he's having trouble with Clerks 3, and you'd think that would be a no-brainer for people, but he's having trouble with Clerks 3 and Mallrats, but if he's doing something original, people seem to be into it and willing to finance it, and boom, he's off to the races and he's got another film on his hands. I think he should just do what he needs to do, and he shouldn't have to apologize for it. I know he does, but I get that's where he gets most of his material, and it's funny the way he makes fun of himself and lambasts himself. It's funny. So I don't think he really means it. He just uses it as an excuse to poke fun of himself, because then he takes the power away from 50 plus people.
Yeah, I concur. And just as we get back to actually making shooting Clerks, so what were some of the challenges, Chris, that you faced while producing shooting Clerks? A very short answer, I'm sure, right?
Oh God, some of the challenges. We lost an actor. I don't mean he died. We lost an actor. That was very challenging. The biggest challenge was we were trying to export the film for our world premiere for the first test screening, which we had at the Orlando Film Festival in Orlando, Florida in October. And everything was ready. The rough cut was finally finished, and we had a day to export it, but it wouldn't export. It just kept crashing and crashing and crashing. And then when it did start to export and we'd fixed all the errors, it was going really slowly. It was really, really slow. And I was sitting there thinking, geez, come on. I've got like 4 hours until I have to jump on a train, then jump on a plane and fly to Florida with this friggin' thing on a pen drive or whatever. And it just wasn't happening in 2 hours and 1 hour and 45 minutes until we had to leave for this bloody train. And my US producer, Ryan James, and my on-set producer, Brett Murray, both joked that we should just put the computer into a suitcase. Because I thought, if I take the hard drives out, there's a chance they're going to get damaged, because 3 of them are not protected. They don't have cases. They would literally just be taken out of the case itself. And if I take the tower and all the external hard drives, because it's spread over 7 or 8 hard drives, it's so huge. If I take them all and I take the computer, when we get there, just plug it into a monitor, plug it into a mouse, just continue exporting or restart the export. We had 4 days until the actual festival premiere. Because if we took the hard drives with the project and all the files on it, the negatives, then we'd have to reassociate everything on a brand new computer, and then there might be problems, and it might take us an extra day. So what we did is we stuck it in a suitcase and we took it to Florida, and it was nerve-wracking. Sat on the train thinking, geez, are we going to get stopped, or is it going to get broken? And we sat waiting to get on the plane, and same thing going through my head. And the only thing that sort of relaxed me and took my mind off it was we got on the first plane, and it was a paper plane. It was the crappiest plane. I didn't feel secure on it. I didn't feel happy about this friggin' plane. But when we got on our KLM flight to New York, which was then going to get another flight to Florida, it was fantastic. All this legroom, TV, as much entertainment as you want. We get free beer, and we're all just sort of like laughing at the scenario, because we've been used to, eating mac and cheese out of a shoe because we were so poor. And here we are sat on this flight, and all this amazing stuff is happening because of the film. And when we get there, for some reason, it's fine to take a computer into America. They'd opened it, they'd opened the case, and they'd slapped a "sorry, we searched your case" notice on it, and then zipped it back up. And I thought, great, fantastic. So we wait for a ride, and Ryan James comes to pick us up, my US producer and assembly editor. And he drives us to his apartment. We dump our stuff, and everybody else goes out. So it was myself, my producer Brett, Jay Booten, who plays Dave Klein, and Chris Bain, who plays Jason Mewes. So we all flew out together. So they all go out to start enjoying America, and myself and Ryan James, we go to a friend's studio where he works to use the facilities to hook up the computer and then start the export. So we get there, we hook up the computer, it's bricked, which basically means that the hard drive is broken, because the baggage handlers had thrown it about, and I forgot to have a sticker put on the case saying, be gentle with this. So the hard drive that is broken has 25% of the film on it and all of the effects. So I start having a meltdown, and James, I call him James, Ryan James, he starts having a meltdown. And we're running out of time because we've only got the evening there. So we're there for about 7 or 8 hours, and we have to leave in the morning because people are going to come into work. So he decides that we're going to go to his film school, UCF, I believe. So the next day we go to UCF, and we go into an editing bay, and that's where we remained for 3-4 days. We were in this editing bay. We slept on the floor, 2 hours each. At one point, he slept on the floor while every sort of like 5 to 15 minutes, he'd have to get up, fix the error while rendering, and then continue rendering for another 15 minutes and go back to sleep. And he had to do this for like 2 hours. He had to keep getting up. Whereas I was kind of lucky. I was in the corridor asleep for a full like hour and then another full hour. And I don't know how we managed it, but we pulled the movie back from the brink of Silicon Hell, and we replaced a lot of the special effects, and the footage that we'd lost, we pieced together with bits and pieces that we found in the original export. So it was from an earlier cut where we could see the footage, and it was a lesser quality because it was obviously compressed and exported for use elsewhere. I think it was the cut that I showed the cast to. And then we screened it on the Saturday, and people seemed to love it. And Bob Hawke gave us a fantastic review, so it was worth it. But if you ask me to do it again, I'm going to lock myself into a padded cell, because I'd rather be there for 5 days than do that again.
So you were able to actually save that hard drive, so that was bricked.
Well, we didn't save the hard drive. The hard drive is still bricked, but we came home and I looked into it. All the footage that we lost, we were able to re-download, because a lot of it was stock footage or footage that was sent to us from America, because the stuff was shot there. Because a lot of the film was shot in the actual locations in New Jersey. So we were able to get replacement stuff, and the few shots here and there, we had maybe like 15 shots that were gone completely. Those were reshot by my second unit guy, and he saved our backside. And we were able to get even slightly better shots, because there were either no cars in the new shots, or the lighting was less intense because it was the winter. You see what I mean? His name is Daniel Buckley. I thought I'd just give him a shout out. He's always saving our backsides. He's our New Jersey second unit guy. He gets all of our establishing shots. Like, it's incredible. And, we've got him to thank in a small way for helping us to fix the latest cut, which we showed in New Jersey and New York.
So you were actually able then, did you actually film in the actual quick stop, or did you have to?
No.
Okay.
We got a set. We built a set for the quick stop stuff, and for RST. In fact, one of the things I'm most proud of is most of the set for RST, because we're able to find. So we had to find like space to build the set, but they had to have a window, because we couldn't build a set inside a warehouse, then hire a generator and hire expensive lights, 1000s-watt lights, to blast through the window to make it look like it was daylight. We had to actually have daylight on the other side. And luckily it was the summer, so it was relatively consistent. So that's one of the sets I'm most proud of. And because it was a set, we could just shoot whenever we wanted. Whereas if we did it in the store, we'd be limited. Plus, it was really expensive.
Yeah, I can imagine that. That's why I assumed you shot on a set. But I always want to ask, because it would be funny though if you did really shoot in the actual the actual quick stop, and the people there could be like, "You're gonna make. We already had it shoot here once. You're gonna shoot here again."
Twice.
Yeah.
Well, three times really, because if you consider Jay and Silent Bob. And they're going to shoot there eventually again. I don't think the whole film's set there, because I know Kevin would be able to, make it worth their while, but I don't think they'd want to shut for 3 weeks of production.
Yeah.
And I don't think Kevin wants to shoot all nights again.
Yeah, that's where he started. That's where he got his cigarette addiction. Was on Clerks. I remember he was telling a story that to keep himself awake, he literally just would smoke cigarettes. And that was his whole thing. And
well, that's all done now. He doesn't smoke cigarettes anymore. He's off the tobacco.
Yeah. And so it's funny too, because right down the street from me, Chris, is where they were going to film Mallrats 2. There's actually a mall, and Kevin actually took a picture of himself with this mall. They were so close to being able to get this deal done, but because there's a lot of just conflicting schedules, they couldn't film there. But it would just have been so crazy that right down the street from me was where he was going to film Mallrats 2.
Yeah.
But now they're gonna. I hear it's gonna be a TV show anyway, and it's gonna be filming somewhere else. But anyway, but it's just it's just crazy. But how things sort of work out. So as we talk, again, just going back to shooting Clerks, so you were able to have this premiere. So are you showing the film now? Are you sort of taking it around to different locations to premiere to show it at different venues?
We are, yeah. We started with the test screens. It was called the Early Bird Tour, and we handed out swag bags, and there was merchandise, and we put a lot of effort in it because it was an exclusive tour. It had to be worth your while because you were seeing a slightly unpolished version of the film. We had 2 sound mixes done. That's all we had done, and they were basic sound mixes. And as I said, some of the effects were missing. But even for those screenings, I think we got some placeholder effects. And the film, we actually recently sat down with my producer Brett and went over. I did editing notes, he did effects notes, and I spent like 15 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 5 minutes there, not writing anything because very little needs done. The film that people saw, certainly in New Jersey and New York, is you're never going to remember the things that are different. So it's going to essentially be the same film. It's almost done, but when it's fully done, we'll be applying for BBFC classification so that we can show the film in Britain. Because unluckily, we're not allowed to show an unrated film in Britain, so we haven't been able to screen it here. But we'll be coming back to the States before then because we can screen unrated films. We're planning a proper tour actually. I'm speaking with someone after this call actually regarding the final date because we have to sort of work from Kevin's. We'll call it the homecoming tour, something like that, because we start in Kevin's old home and we end in Kevin's new home. So we start in Jersey and we do a couple of dates on the East Coast, and we go to the West Coast and we end in Los Angeles. So that'll be a crazy tour and then after that we'll do DVD, Blu-ray, and then VOD, and then eventually Netflix, where anybody can watch it even if they're not interested for 10 minutes.
Yeah,
and that's all we need to skew the demographic.
Yeah, I mean that's great. I honestly, man, I really, I'm glad to see the film is moving forward again, because I first heard of this, Chris. I actually saw the Indiegogo, and that was
a while ago. Now.
Yeah, and I saw that and I was like, wow, that was actually really cool. And I think, I'm not sure if I reached out to you then or maybe I didn't. I can't remember. I probably didn't. I probably put it in my note pile. Because I mean, and the reason I bring it up, Chris, is because I've run crowdfunding campaigns, and it's beyond a full-time job, and you get so many messages. The last one I did, I got so many messages from so many other people about so many other things that I was like, what the hell is this? Because people would ask, hey Dave, could you help me out with this? And I said, guys, I'm in the middle of running my own campaign. I don't have time to help you with yours, or stuff like that. So I'm sure you probably are inundated with like 10,000 messages a day.
Yeah, we got strange messages, and people say things like, if you cast me in a role, I'd be willing to put a little bit of money into the film. I'm like, well, I guess we could do that to an extent. What role were you interested in? I want to play Kevin. Right, well, we can't really do that. It's like, come on, mate, I'm going to give you $1,000. I'm like, well, we need more than $1,000, as the Indiegogo campaign says, and B, we've already cast Kevin, and he's been the same actor has been Kevin in the shorts, and he sends me all these headshots, and he's like a redhead, and very obviously a redhead because he's got rosacea and really pink skin, and he keeps saying, like, trust me, I can grow a really good beard, and I'm like, I don't want to be mean, mate, but we've already cast Kevin. We can give you a small role in the film, and you come on board as a producer or something like that, because that's one of the things we offered. You want to come on board as a producer, or you want to have a small walk-on role and support the film that way, then that's fine. So it was like 3 months down the line, and he sends me a picture. It's like, you're going to be happy with this. And he sends me a picture of himself, and he's grown somewhat of a beard, and it looks like he's just gone in with a Sharpie and coloured in his ginger beard. with this Sharpie. And the reason I know it was a Sharpie is because Mark has blonde hair, and a lot of the time his beard would grow in. We'd shave it down to the same length it was, and then all the dye was gone, all the hair dye that we put in his hair. So we'd get mascara, and then we just touch it up. Then you dry it off, get any of the excess, and it looks like darker hair. So he must have used a Sharpie if he couldn't make it look convincing. And I just remember sort of putting my face in my hands, like, this guy's a tough sell. I'm just not going to be able to get this guy to understand that we can't put him in the movie. But he eventually lost interest, and I hope he's all right. I hope he's doing well, because I feel bad, but we couldn't replace Mark. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Simon. That was his name. I'll not say his second name. I'm sorry that we couldn't put you in the film, but, next film, you can certainly be an extra.
Well, Chris, I will have to disagree, though. I don't think. I mean, I'm a ginger myself. I don't have any rosacea, and my skin's actually pretty good looking. But
there's two types of redheads. There is, they call it a daywalker in South Park, which basically means that you've got this like really dark red hair, but you don't have freckles and you don't have pale skin. And then you've got like standard redhead people. We've got the red hair and the freckles, and then the occasional rosacea. I've got freckles and pale skin, but I'm not even a redhead. I'm Scottish, so we all look like that. We all have freckles because we're not exposed to the sun. And then when summertime happens and you get your 4 hours of sunlight, your skin burns and fizzles and eventually develops into freckles. And the reason my skin is pale is because the rest of the days out of the year, I'm blue.
It's funny because I actually have a friend, Chris, who
I was worried that you were going to say, by the way, I'm Simon. I used an alternate name, and God damn you for not putting me in shooting Clerks.
Well, that's what I was going to say next. I am Simon, and you don't put me in Clerks because of my rosacea. No, I actually have a friend of mine who actually looks like Kevin Smith. And when he wears and the funny thing is, he has the black hair, black beard, everything. And he has one of the worst cases of rosacea I've ever seen. And, like, it just, like, even his mom would say, like, one time somebody said to him, "Oh, your son, his cheeks were so rosy today." And she goes, "Oh, they always look like that." And she goes, "Oh, I thought it was because he was out in the cold." She goes, "Oh, no, he's got the worst case of rosacea ever." And this is his own mom saying this. So I'm like, oh, yeah. So,
like, you can get away with rosacea. I didn't know it was a thing. I just thought I just call it rosy cheeks. And then someone slaps the name rosacea on, and you're like, oh, okay, well, it's a condition with the skin and the blood in your skin. It's not the worst thing to happen to you. It's not going to kill you or anything like that. But when I was a kid, because it's so cold in Scotland, you come in from the cold and you've got that face a lot of the time. So rosacea, no one really knew what rosacea was, because everyone looked like that, basically, at least 1 or 2 times of the year. But it was weird that he very much brought that up and says, like, I can dye my hair, and he didn't mention using a Sharpie on his beard though. He didn't have a mustache. That was another thing. He said he couldn't grow a mustache, but he was willing to pay for someone to do like a fake mustache and stick it on. Sorry.
That happened to me too, though. All kidding aside, when I was doing my crowdfunding campaign, I had people reach out to me and actually say, well, if you cast me in this, I'll promote it to my audience. If you cast me in this, I can throw some money in towards it. And I said, I said, guys, I would be so fearful you take someone's money and then you put them in the movie, they suck or whatever, and then you're like, well, what the hell do you do then? So what I always did was I said, listen, if you want, throw some money towards this, and I could put you as an extra or whatever else. And people would get offended at that. They were like, "Oh, you want me to have to pay to be a part of this? I should report you to SAG." And I said, "Wait a minute! You just told me the other day you were willing to pay money for this." And I'm like, I tell you, it's just the crazies come out, and the desperation really comes out when they see like a crowdfunding campaign for a project that has not only a solid concept, but they also see that there's some actual validity and actual production value behind it.
Yeah. We cast people for smaller roles that weren't related to Clerks that we were fans of. We got two people I really wanted to work with, Kevin Smith and James Rolfe. Now, they're not the same type of people. One of them is like an internet icon, and the other one's a film icon. But I really like the Angry Video Game Nerd and pretty much anything that Cinemassacre puts out. So I went to James at first when we were casting all the smaller parts, and I said, would you be interested in being a part of this? I know you're a fan of Kevin. I'm a fan of your work. And you're from Jersey, so your accent's going to sound, it's going to be one of the better accents because you're actually from there. He actually lives in Philly now. And he didn't get back to me because I just assumed wasn't interested. Coming at the end of production, and I get an email, and we have a sit down and have a chat, and he's very interested in doing it, and he knocked out his scene in like 2 days later, and I had it within the week. And it was amazing to just be sat there with the missing piece of a scene at last, and to have James Rolfe in it. So it's integrated in the film, and of course we're like, okay, well, we should put everybody in the trailer at the end, or during the sort of montage sequence of the first trailer, which is what we did. We even had Mike Matei in there, who's got a very small role in it. And people said, oh, you get James Rolfe in it for James Rolfe's audience. And they accused us of putting James and Mike in it so that we could sort of leech off of their audience. But the fact was, we did it because I like James and I like Mike. And if you're talking about leeching off of James' audience and Mike's, it's the same audience as Kevin Smith. It's the same types of people. So there's no real truth in that. So same people who like Kevin Smith probably going to like James Rolfe. Gamers, nerds, film geeks. It's basically what we all essentially are. So
yeah, I would agree with that, Chris. And so as we talk about shooting Clerks, and and you're going to be going around and showing this, and you have the plans in place. You actually have about a couple other projects I just want to ask about on your IMDb.
Sure.
The two are the 12 Steps of Jason Mewes and Emo Kev Rides Again. Are these planned to are these sort of like in complement of shooting Clerks?
The 12 Steps of Jason Mewes, the follow-up, Undercover Lover, that was shot 3 years ago, but we haven't finished editing it. I actually handed editing duties over to Brett Murray, my producer, and guy who plays Brian Johnson in the film, because I was doing shooting Clerks, and then I knew I'd be doing Emo Kev Rides Again after I'd finished Locked Picture on shooting Clerks. The Emo Kev Rides Again is a follow-up to Emo Kev, of course. It's a follow-up to a promise we make at the end of Emo Kev. Emo Kev is one of my favourite films that I've ever made. It fully showcases the style that I wanted to go for, and I developed my style, funnily enough, on that film, because I was able to just go slightly more artsy with it, and I really, really dug what I did with that, and I've transferred all the stylistic choices and the editing choices that I made in that onto shooting Clerks. But at the end of it, I say Kevin and company, or Kevin and Mosier, will return in Emo Kev Rides Again, and I was going to make it, and then the feature came along, and I thought, well, I'm not going to do any more shorts, because I'm done doing shorts. Doing shorts my whole adult life. I want to do features now. But then I thought, well, everyone's supported us for so long. Everyone's been really nice, and that film specifically has been really highly complimented, and everyone considers it our best of the shorts. So why not do one final short film that we can use to promote shooting Clerks, and also say goodbye to all the fans on the small screen. So Emo Kev Rides Again is very much a sequel to Emo Kev, but there's DNA strands from all the other films, and characters from Babylon Begins, from Get Greedo, Gooper even makes appearances from Gooper and things like that. So we wanted to say goodbye by making this sort of celebration, and also by saying it's not really goodbye, we're going to go see shooting Clerks. And the films actually take place at the same point. There's a wraparound in Emo Kev Rides Again, and we start in one, it's like Emo Kev, so we start in one time, and then we go back to the 1990s when we see a sort of early 20s Kevin Smith, and then we flash back to the modern era, and then the last frame of Emo Kev Rides Again, this isn't spoiling anything, the last frame of Emo Kev Rides Again is the first frame of shooting Clerks.
Well, that's actually really cool. That is a nice tie-in. It's kind of like what inspired you, Chris, is all those tie-ins, that Kevin was doing with Jay and Silent Bob.
Exactly, yeah. And I'm big on shared universes and things like that, and hope to one day. I mean, I've got plans for shared universes. That was my kind of idea, was to have multiple different universes, so that I don't have to sort of stick to the rules of one world. Especially when you've got, say, you do a movie set in the real world, like shooting Clerks, with real people, you can't really have your next film, which is maybe about intergalactic war, set in the future. You can't really have those take place in the same universe. It's not the same as Kevin's movies, where they're grounded somewhat in reality, with the exception of Dogma. I think the only characters that transfer to anything is Jay and Silent Bob, because they're so ridiculous sometimes. So I'm working on doing shared universe, but building it up slower, because you have to do one film set in one universe, one film set in the other one. And you may have a film that's set in a standalone universe, but I'm big on world building. So I studied game design when I did my graphic design degree, and that's one of the biggest and most important things, is world building. So I've tried to perfect that even when I was doing graphic design.
Yeah, I know what you mean about the whole world building thing, and I agree. When my first experience with that, especially, was with the works of Bret Easton Ellis. Bret Easton Ellis and all his novels and all his stuff, and you would see guys come in from other books and stuff like that, and I would be like, wow, that's absolutely amazing. And
I love that. I honestly love that. I love the connections, and it's tenuous, like with just American Psycho and Rules of Attraction, and those films. I love both of those films. I know not a lot of people are big on Rules of Attraction, but I and even the film, which are set, one set in the 80s and one set in the modern era, obviously. So they didn't even go for it to bridge the gap. But there's a moment where they actually reference Patrick Bateman. So they even tried to do it with the films. And there's a point, actually, I believe that they were going to have a scene in maybe in the novel, actually, a scene in the movie for Rules of Attraction where James Van Der Beek's character sits down with his brother, and it was going to be Christian Bale playing Patrick Bateman. I don't know how they were going to do it, because obviously he exists in the 80s and he's existing in the early 90s. Maybe they were going to age him up, or just not explain the fact that he doesn't look any different. Because technically he could be his dad if you're going with that timeline, age-wise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I imagine, because, it'd be funny too, because I think the American Psycho, that Christian Bale would have to look exactly the same, because that's the vanity of Patrick Bateman. Was that,
exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
he would have to look very. In fact, if he looked similar, you could go down all kinds of different avenues, and Easton has got the ability to do that. I've only ever read one of his books, and the way he describes things for some people can be monotonous, but I like it, because especially with American Psycho, and he does it in American Psycho, mainly in American Psycho, because it's from the point of view of Patrick, and he's a narcissistic piece of shit. So
yeah.
He's going to just explain everything in detail. He's very proud of everything. He's proud of himself, proud of his apartment, proud of his routines, proud of the women he bangs and then murders. Proud of everything, apart from the fact that he's a psychopath. I don't know if he's overly proud about that, but yeah.
It's funny. I didn't even notice this until somebody pointed it out to me. If you watch the movie of American Psycho, the first thing Patrick Bateman says when he's doing that narration, he doesn't tell you who he is. He tells you where he lives, like a status symbol. This is my apartment, and this is blah blah blah. And then my name is Patrick Bateman. I'm like, oh, okay, because obviously he wants you to be impressed with all his stuff, because he has
exactly. I think the one of the best scenes in that movie, because it's a fantastic piece of satire. It's when they're comparing business cards. And if you don't get it, you won't understand why the scene exists or why it's funny. And I've never seen anything like that in a film since. I think it was ahead of its time. I think it's even maybe ahead of its time now. Nobody makes satire like that. It was because they're all the same, and he's flipping out, and they're more impressed by the next card, and you're like, they look the same. And this is not me looking at it with uneducated eyes or non-artistic eyes, they're fucking the same. And he's flipping out because he's got a car that's better than him, and he's so shallow that a card, even if it was drastically different, that would make him less of a man.
Yeah, the card's called Bone, and the text is something called Cillian Rail, and you're like, each font looks exactly like the other fonts.
Exactly, and it's incredible, and I love that movie. I recently just bought it on Blu-ray, and it's one of the only Blu-rays that I own that comes in a black box.
Yeah, I think that film is I think it's great, and I actually would, sometimes I have friends over and I kind of have like my own little movie parties, and what I do is I show movies that they usually would never have heard of before.
Yeah,
and so American Psycho was actually one I showed a lot of people about, and they were like, "Wow, this is phenomenal. How come we haven't heard about it?" And I said, "Well, they really didn't like the whole angle of that, the fact that he's going around butchering women, and the whole thing at the end, and it didn't sit well with a lot of people, so it was kind of like put to the side."
That's something that I've never. I mean, I understand it if you're a bit of a dum-dum, but I don't think the people that had problems with it are intellectually challenged. I just think that they couldn't really see like the satirical turn on it, and psychopaths will target the weaker people, like prostitutes and not in this instance, but children and animals and things like that, and that is sad, but that's what happens. So to depict it, and it's not exactly like it's glamorizing it. It's just like Trainspotting. Trainspotting doesn't glamorize being a drug addict, and he showed it in a cartoonistic way because you have to soften the blow. It's really dark, and people die in that movie, and people lose everything, and they're ill, and it's not glamorous. And the same can be applied to American Psycho. It's not glamorous. You watch it in dread, because at the back of your head you're like, God, imagine if I did this. I would never be able to sleep. Imagine if even I was this narcissistic or this sociopathic. It would be a nightmare. And the reason you enjoy it is because it's a fly on the wall. You're watching this horrendous, horrible person do all these horrible things. But it's like, this is what psychopaths do. And this is you learning firsthand from a fictional psychopath what they do. And to call it sexist, I mean, makes no sense. I mean, you can maybe say that Bret Easton is sexist for writing the book. I don't think he is personally, but the film was written and directed by two women. So
yeah, Mary Harron. Yeah, and it's and I think they had to do that because again, because of the subject matter. And I agree with you completely, Chris. I think a lot of people miss the whole satire of everything that goes on there. And but yeah, and
I think it was handled incredibly well, and like you've got these. I wouldn't even say it's people who are sexist, but saying things like don't give like a masculine movie to a woman to write, because what does she know about men? Gwen Turner, who wrote American Psycho, is a woman, feminine woman, right? She wrote that. Granted, it was based on Brett's book. She wrote that, and I watch it and I go, that's what a man. This is a man turned up to 11, of course, but that is the way certain men act, and she's nailed it. You don't have to be a man to have written the screenplay for American Psycho, so you don't have to be a man to do a Thor movie. You don't have to be a man to do Captain America. You don't have to be a man to do Die Hard. I just think that if you allow people to think that, then they're just going to continue to believe it, and they're not going to be able to cast. They're not going to be able to hire women to do like a fresh new take, because they see us in a different way, and that would be good to see, because they understand men. They're not idiots. Women are not idiots. Men are not idiots. But at the same time, we are all idiots.
Yeah, great point, Chris. Chris, we've been talking for about an hour and 15 minutes. I just want to say, just in closing.
On that note, ask the best question ever then to finish it off.
No, I have no more questions. No. So on that note, I just want to say, I just want to ask actually, what is next for you, Chris, in terms of what project are you working on next?
We are doing, hopefully in the new year, we're going to do a film called Dog and the Dead Guy, which is about it's a day in the life of a deceased man, a ghost, and he is stuck in the house he died in with the new owner's dog. And the dog can understand him and he can understand the dog. But no one else can see him and no one can see or hear the dog's thoughts. So they're stuck in this sort of weird relationship. And they find out that the old lady's going to die. So they spend the entire day trying to lessen the stress to comedic effect. Because they're trying to keep her alive. Because if she's not alive, the dog doesn't get looked after, the dog gets taken away, the ghost's stuck in the house with no one to talk to. So Dog and the Dead Guy is next, and that's our next feature.
Cool. And I mean, I imagine you'll probably get to that, maybe sometime late next year?
Yeah, hopefully. We're hoping either summer or autumn next year. I've written the first draft of the script, and we have our cast, the people that we have in mind in place to pitch the ideas to. So we go to cast first, and then it's off to financing after that.
So, Chris, just in closing, it's a question I ask everybody, and that is there anything we didn't talk about that maybe you wanted to discuss, or is there anything you want to say to sort of put a period at the end of this whole conversation?
I don't know.
Any secrets of the universe? Anything?
Always prepare for the worst. Always prepare for the worst. Whatever it is you do, if you're a podcaster, a filmmaker, an artist, always prepare for the worst. Just mentally, because when it happens, your brain is ready and prepared. And again, though, if something bad happens in your life, you'll find a creative way to move past it. And who knows, it might be a blessing in disguise. I guess that's all I can really say.
And that's great advice, because preparing for the worst, especially even as I find it podcasting, I didn't mention this to you though, Chris, and I'll mention it now. I am on my 6th iteration of recording setups just this year alone. So yeah. I have because you know what happened when Windows updates something, it changes everything. So any type of software you're using, so I was using this piece of software and the Windows update killed it, man. And now I've been sort of picking up the pieces now. So now I'm just set up now, and I have a backup recorder going at the same time. So hopefully now it's all good. Chris, I want to say thank you very much for coming on, and just
thanks for having me.
And where do people find you at online, by the way?
You can find me at Uppie Downie, so UPPIEDOWNIE on Twitter, or you can get us on Facebook on Shooting Clerks. And if you have any questions regarding the film, or if you want to help out in any way on the next film, you can contact me or one of the staff members at Aldreeky Media at info@aldreekymedia.com.
Excellent. And I will link to all that in the show notes as well, everybody. DaveBullis.com, Twitter, it's at Dave_Bullis. Chris Downie, I want to say thank you very much, man.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, my friend. And I wish you the best of luck with Shooting Clerks and Dog and the Dead Guy and, all your future projects, man.
Thanks a lot.
Anytime, buddy. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Laters.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.